Okay, everybody. We're going to do the immune system in this podcast, and it's going to be a long one. The immune system is an incredibly complicated system with lots of different individual cells doing lots of different things, and yet many of them interacting together. And so we're just going to buckle down and see what we can do with this, and hang with me, okay? So the immune system. The first thing we need to understand about the immune system, and actually a few other systems we're going to talk about in the coming days, is that cellular communication, cells interacting and identifying each other, communicating things to each other, is absolutely critical in how the immune system functions. So if you are ever sitting for an AP exam in May, and perhaps you get an essay that asks you to discuss cell communication, the first thing that should come to your mind is the immune system, and also a couple of other systems, endocrine and nervous, which we'll be also talking about soon. Okay, so cell communication is absolutely critical in immune system function, because immune cells, first of all, have to be able to recognize bad cells from good cells, invading cells from the body's own cells, and tell them apart. We don't want to destroy our body's own cells. Bad things happen when that occurs, but we want to be able to destroy invaders. So we have to be able to recognize different cells, and then these immune cells have to communicate with each other to determine what they need to do if they see an invader. They have to coordinate activities and and attack that invader, and so they have to be able to communicate with each other. Now, how do cells communicate? We've already touched on this a little bit when we've talked about cell membranes. This is a pretty good place in our course to bring in this topic. We just finished talking about some cell membranes. And we mentioned when we did so these little markers that are, here's your fundamental membrane structure right here, the phospholipid bilayer, okay, and we've got proteins embedded in the bilayer, and some proteins actually just sitting on the surface of the bilayer, or whatever, peripheral versus integral. But what we want to notice are these structures. This is a carbohydrate chain, a few little carbohydrates. When you have a few little sugars, when you have a few sugars linked, we have a lot of sugars linked, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of sugars linked together. That's a polysaccharide. Well, when you have just a few, more than two, but fewer than 1,000, that is called an oligosaccharide. And for some reason, I think the College Board likes that word. I think it's really trivial, but if you see that, this is just referring to a few sugars, not thousands, but more than two. So this would be an oligosaccharide, a carbohydrate attached to a protein. Here is an oligosaccharide attached to one of these phospholipids right here. If you'll remember those terms, hold on. Those terms that we use to describe those kinds of structures, glycolipids. Glyco means carbohydrate, and of course lipid means it's attached to a lipid. Glycoprotein means the carbohydrate is attached to a protein. Bottom line is these things act as two things: cell identification markers. Let me orient you in this picture. Here is a cell membrane, and sticking out of it is this thing, which is a cell ID marker. And these glycoproteins, glycolipids, also act as receptors, things that can fit with these identification markers. You can see that this has a particular fit that allows it to fit with that identification marker. So receptors and identification markers, that is one very important way that these immune cells are going to be interacting with each other, is the binding of receptors with identification markers. Also, cells secrete chemicals. One cell may secrete a particular chemical, and there might be a receptor. Let's say there's a receptor on this cell that is shaped like this, and this cell over here is secreting, this guy down here is secreting little molecules that are shaped like that. Well, they may fit this receptor and then give this receptor, this cell, some information that it needs to know how to respond to this cell over here. So cells secrete chemicals, cells have markers on their surfaces. Those are the two main ways they communicate, okay? And receptors on target cells receive chemicals. So we already talked about that. All right, now, honing in on the particulars of immunity, because those concepts that I just talked about are general to all types of cell communication, whether it's dealing with the immune system or your endocrine system or your nervous system or whatever. But let's focus in on some immunity ideas. There are two types of immunity, innate and acquired. Okay? You need to know that. Innate immunity simply means that you are born with it fired up and ready to go. It's working from the moment you're born. It responds pretty quickly to invaders. If you get a cut, your innate immunity is responding immediately. In fact, your innate immunity is keeping invaders from getting into your body right now. Your skin is part of that innate immunity. Your innate immune system, this is really an important concept, is not specific. In other words, it is not specific to any particular invader. It's going to be kind of doing a blanket type of barrier protection or response to all kinds of different microbes. Okay, so innate immune system attacks a wide range of microbes, not any one particular microbe specifically. Okay, acquired immunity is pretty much the opposite of innate. It's a slower response. First of all, it's slow because you're not born with it working. It is not active. You have to be exposed to an illness in order for your acquired immunity to work. And so you have to be exposed to every particular illness that your immune system is going to mount an acquired response to. So if you catch a cold virus today, your acquired immune system will ramp up a response. It's going to take it a while, and it will then attack that cold virus, and then the good news is you'll never catch that particular cold again. But you're still not immune to all the other different colds you can get until you actually catch those as well. It's only effective after exposure to one particular microbe. It is extraordinarily specific to very specific viruses, very specific bacteria, whatever, and it will make you immune. It will allow your body to fight a future exposure to that particular pathogen, that particular invader, extremely quickly the next time you see it. So quickly that you will never even know you were exposed the second time. That first time makes you feel not so good. So please understand that these two types of immunity are absolutely dependent on each other. One is not better than the other. Without one, the other doesn't work as well. So we need both of them working. Now, the players in these immune responses, there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of things happening, a lot of cells, a lot of chemicals, so we need to kind of just organize in our mind what we're going to be talking about in the most general terms. So, innate immunity. The actors in innate immunity are barriers, like your skin, that are just going to prevent things from getting in the first place. There are certain cells that are going to attack invaders as part of your innate immune system. And there are certain chemicals, proteins in particular, that are going to attack invaders as well. So a barrier to keep things from getting in. If stuff gets in, we've got cells that will attack them, and also non-living things, just chemicals, proteins, that will attack the invaders. Okay? With acquired immunity, we also have cells, different kinds of cells, and also proteins, different kinds of proteins that will attack the invaders. No barriers. The acquired immune response is always takes place once you have broken through your skin or whatever it's inside your body. And of course, we need to not forget who else is going to be interacting in this immune response, and those are the bad guys, the guys we are fighting. Please know this word. General term for anything that is invading your body is a pathogen. Okay? So, who are the pathogens? Well, you might have something that looks like this. It's a virus. Remember, viruses are non-living, technically. They can't reproduce or use energy or do anything except when inside a host cell. Otherwise, they are inert chemicals laying around on surfaces waiting to be picked up. So they are considered generally non-living. Bacteria, which are living. Protists, like amoeba, and so on. These are, you remember, bacteria are prokaryotic cells, very primitive, simple cells, whereas protists are eukaryotic, okay, and so is everything else we'll talk about from here on out is eukaryotic. Fungi can, and I don't think I wrote protist, so let me write protist up here. Fungi are eukaryotic as well. This is a poor kid that's got ringworm, which is a type of fungus, not a type of worm. But you could get worms as well, and that's also a type of pathogen. This is a good old tapeworm. So we even have animals that can infect our bodies. Generally, I don't think there's any plants that act as pathogens or on us, but almost every other kingdom is represented. Okay, now this is an important thing to note. Pathogens can be floating in the blood plasma. So let's say here is a blood vessel here, and you've got cells, blood cells, okay? Well, you can have a nasty little pathogen floating all out free in the blood plasma. Remember, blood plasma is just the water, basically the water of the blood. It's got solutes in it and other things, but it's what the blood cells are floating in. So bacteria can just be floating out here and bumping into blood cells and stuff and just hanging out. So that's one way the pathogens can be apparent in your body, is they're just floating around with the other cells and bumping into them and whatever. But they can also actually hide inside your cells. For example, that's how viruses work. Viruses don't float free out here. I mean, they can do that as well, but they make their living by going inside your blood cells and taking over your cell's machinery, not blood cells. Anyway, they go inside your body cells and take over your cell's machinery to make more virus particles. So this response to stuff that's just floating around in your body fluids is fundamentally a bit different than stuff that is hiding inside your cells, because how does an immune cell see something if it's hiding inside one of your very own cells? It's hidden. It looks like you. So that's a problem that we will see how the immune system solves that problem. Okay, bacteria can do that in addition to viruses, but at any rate. Finally, sometimes the invader may not be an outside critter at all. It may be one of the body's own cells, so it technically, I guess, can't be called an invader, but it certainly is something you don't want. For example, a cancer cell, a cell of the body that has gone bad. It is going to turn cancerous and reproduce out of control. The immune system, if it is working properly and catches it, can destroy that cancer cell before it becomes a problem. So that's something else we have to, the immune system has to be able to recognize. Now, as we are talking about the immune system, we've got to have a quick conversation about blood cells. Just so you know, red blood cells are erythrocytes. Erythrocyte is just the fancy word for a red blood cell. Their main job is to carry oxygen around your body. A red blood cell is kind of a disc-shaped thing, a flattened biconcave. It's kind of squished in on both sides. Disc, the reason it is because that makes it have the maximum surface area, and that allows more O2 to diffuse into the cell more efficiently because it has so much surface area for its volume. So that's why red blood cells are shaped the way they're shaped. They are basically nothing more than sacs of hemoglobin. Nothing more than sacs of hemoglobin, which is a protein that carries oxygen. Protein that carries oxygen. If you'll recall, we talked about in our biochem unit how it's got iron in it, and the iron atoms are really what binds the oxygen. The hemoglobin, the red blood cell is just a sac of this hemoglobin carrying oxygen to whatever parts of the body need it. Okay? Now, platelets down here are basically bits, broken up bits, that maybe look like that, of red blood cells. And these play a really important role in clotting the blood. So plugging up the hole, if you have an injury, they just will plug up that hole, along with some really important proteins. There are some really important clotting proteins that are also zymogens. If you'll remember, they have an inactive form and then become active when they are needed, which is again really good because we don't want just random clots forming in our body, so they become active when they're needed. So that's very beneficial. But what we want to talk about are white blood cells. White blood cells, the fancy word for those is leukocytes. Leuko means white. So these are, and cyte means cell, so white blood cells. And these is the general term for any cell fighting infection in your body. And we'll talk about some different types of leukocytes. Generally, leukocytes are the stereotypical big round cells, although they do tend, some of them, to have pseudopods that come off of them, much like an amoeba would, and we'll talk about that, but they are not these flattened discs like we see with the red blood cells. Okay, now we will talk quickly about barriers and some more of the innate system, and then we're going to take a break. So let's do the barriers. Skin, of course, mucous membranes, which are the anything that is a moist membrane that has exposure to the outside but is not dry like your skin. So a mucous membrane, the skin that lines your mouth, your nose, your sinus passages, your digestive tract is lined with mucous membranes. Of course, mucous membranes make mucus, and sometimes we think that's a bad thing. When you get a cold, you get snot coming out, and it's disgusting, but it's really a good thing because mucus is a thick substance. It traps invaders. It prevents them from getting somewhere that they want to go. It's a very good thing. There are cilia that line places like your windpipe, your trachea, and beat and force invaders up and away from, say, your lungs, where they might gain access to your body. And so mucous membranes have all kinds of protective agents about them to keep your insides from getting infected. Pathogens think your body would be a great place to live. It's warm, it's moist, it's got food, and they would love to live in it. So mucous membranes, again, are another way, incorporating many ways to keep them out. Secretions of the skin, this is important. Saliva, your spit, tears, and mucus all have a particular enzyme in them called lysozyme. You can tell it's an enzyme. It doesn't have the ACE, but it does have the zyme. Lyso referring to lysis. It breaks down cell walls of bacteria. So in your spit, in your tears, in your mucus is an enzyme that is going to break down the cell walls of bacteria, which will cause them to pop. Because water will flow into them and they will have no way to prevent themselves from exploding if they have no cell walls. Your oil and sweat glands on your skin actually create a slightly acidic condition on your skin. We don't notice that, but if you're a bacteria, it might be just acid enough to inhibit your growth, to even maybe kill you. It's not a very good environment for many bacteria. Obviously, some bacteria have evaded that defense, but some do fall victim to it.
Mr. Russell, rumor has it you're in front of room 311 and can unlock that door. Thank you.
Also, hydrochloric acid in the stomach. When you eat stuff, it's got bacteria on it. When it hits your stomach, the acid does attack and kill many, many, many of these bacteria. Of course, anybody who's ever had a stomach virus, food poisoning, whatever, knows that unfortunately that is not 100% effective, but it's certainly better than nothing. All right, the cellular components. So let's say we've broken through the skin, and now we're going to rely on cells that are within our bodies to attack invaders. The innate response, remember this is the non-specific, it's ready to go right away response, has a couple of different types of cells that are involved in attacking invaders. First are phagocytic cells, and second are non-phagocytic. Okay? Now, let's remember, what is phagocytosis? We just got through talking about this. It is cellular eating. Cellular eating. This is when we have a cell that, well, I think I have a picture. There we go. A cell is going to engulf some invader. So these are pseudopods, and they just come out and engulf this guy and encase him in a little vacuole. Phagocytic white blood cells kill stuff by eating them. Okay? It's that simple. Not all white blood cells work that way, but those that are phagocytic do. Non-phagocytic cells obviously don't incorporate this method. Also, a cellular component of the innate response is the chemicals that are often secreted by both of these phagocytic and non-phagocytic cells. They will secrete chemicals that help to fight infection, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. The common thread. None of these in the innate response, none of the phagocytic, non-phagocytic, or any of these chemicals, none of them is specific. None. Okay? They are a general fighter against any microbe that comes into your body, but they are not specifically designed to fight any one particular microbe. Okay? Now, this is a great diagram of phagocytosis, so if you didn't really get what phagocytosis was, or endocytosis, or whatever when we did cell membranes, please try to get it here. This is showing the microbes, whatever they may be, looks like little bacteria, are getting engulfed here. They come in contact with the cell membrane and they're getting engulfed by this white blood cell. We'll talk about what that word means in a minute, but this is just a white blood cell. Okay? Now, as a result, the microbes end up getting encased in a vacuole. We might call it a food vacuole. It's a vacuole that encases the pathogen. Now, an important organelle called a lysosome contains digestive enzyme. It's a little sac that just contains lots of digestive, it says it right here, digestive enzymes. Okay? So these enzymes, this organelle is going to fuse with this vacuole, and these enzymes are going to mesh with those pathogens, and they're going to just digest them, break them down, and anything that cannot be used is going to be sent out of the body, okay, or out of the cell, I guess I should say. All right. All right, so please try to remember, this is a great point to talk about lysosomes and what they do. Please try to remember that. It's one of the many organelles that you probably learned about when you were in 7th grade. Basically a membrane-bound sac that's got digestive enzymes in it and breaks stuff down. If you are asked, what kind of cells would you find a lot of lysosomes in? White blood cells have a ton of them. Other cells, not so much. White blood cells, their structure is related to their function, just like everything else, and they are eating a ton, so they're going to have lots of lysosomes to aid in all that digestion. Whereas maybe a nerve cell, not so much. Eating stuff is not a nerve cell's job. Okay? All right. Okay. Let's go through the different types of phagocytic white blood cells real quick. There's 4 that you might want to make note of. The most common type of phagocytic white blood cells are neutrophils, and they look like this. This is an electron micrograph of one. This is the pathogen. It looks like a bacterium that this thing is eating, engulfing. Neutrophils make up about 70% of all the white blood cells in your body. All of the white blood cells in your body, okay, are neutrophils. They're extremely important. They do a ton of eating of bacteria or whatever other pathogens, but they don't live very long. They are very short-lived. They don't hang out for more than a few days doing their job. They eat and then they die. Okay, eosinophils, this is a teeny-weeny baby worm, and these things all out here are eosinophils, white blood cells designed to attack large invaders, like a multicellular worm, and what they do is they snuggle up to it, and then they squirt chemicals on it because this one little guy cannot phagocytose this great big huge worm. So they squirt chemicals onto it that digest it. If you remember the silly string fiasco, at any rate, they squirt chemicals on it and break it down, and then they can phagocytose the debris. All right. Macrophages. This word, if you see the term monocyte, that is a cell that will become a macrophage, but it's not yet. It's not mature. So monocytes become macrophages. This is probably the word you really need to know, though, is macrophage. And these are, macro means big, and phage means eat. So these are big eaters, and you can see this particular macrophage extending out a huge pseudopod out to grab that little bacterium. So again, big eater. They're going to be really important later. Dendritic cells, you can see that this guy too has these pseudopods that extend out. He would eat very much like the macrophage would. What's different between these two? They really behave very similarly. What's different is mostly their location. Macrophages can be just about anywhere. Internally, dendritic cells tend to hang out near the skin, so that if you're cut, they're probably one of the first things there, for example. Okay, non-phagocytic cells. Only one type that we're really going to talk about, and that is called a natural killer cell. These come into play when the invader is hidden from us. We cannot see it. What situation would that be? When it is hiding inside a body cell. So here is what this slide is calling a target cell. This is a body cell, and inside it that we cannot see might be little virus particles. Okay? We can't see them there. What the normal body cell does when it is infected with something bad like a virus or bacteria, it secretes chemicals that are messengers. They are called interferons. Okay? And these interferons tell neighboring cells Here's a neighboring cell. Okay, here's a neighboring cell, and they're nearby, and they don't want to get this virus. So this is a message to them that says, bring up your defenses. There's a virus in the area. Save yourselves. Okay? And interferon also is going to do another important thing, and that's call these natural killer cells to the cell that is infected. They're going to call the natural killer cell to the infected cell, and it is going to cause this cell essentially to commit cellular suicide. It will kill itself. That is better than just coming up here and hacking it with like some kind of spear or something and just poking holes in it. Because remember, it's got nasty, evil things inside of it. So if we just poke holes in it, guess who comes out? The nasty, evil things. So when this natural killer cell comes up to the infected cell and causes it to kill itself, we call this apoptosis. It is probably, I believe, more properly pronounced apoptosis, but I've heard both. It is programmed cell death. And it is a very orderly way for a cell to kill itself. And why that is so desirable in the situation is because when the cell kills itself in this very orderly way, the virus cannot just be released. The virus is going to be destroyed as well. So natural killer cells then, their job is to attack the body's own cells that are hiding pathogens inside of them. And chemical signals made by the target cell, the body cell, called interferon, are going to alert the natural killer cell and other body cells that there is a problem. And then the natural killer cell will secrete chemicals onto the target cell that strongly suggest to it that it just needs to kill itself. It just needs to do itself in. And that's apoptosis or apoptosis, programmed cell death. This is not the only place we see programmed cell death. We see it in other places as well. When you were an embryo, you had webbing between your fingers. You no longer do. You don't because apoptosis occurred, programmed cell death of that tissue before you were born. It was designed to die, to kill itself, and so it is here as well, if it gets the proper chemical signal. Okay. I think that might be a good place to stop. We'll pick up on the innate response again and talk about the proteins of the innate response, but I think we probably ought to take a break from this right now. We'll do this probably in 3 parts altogether. So thanks for watching, and I will see you at the next podcast.